the next point is a tweet by coopertrooper.eth, and he says, we need to make the onboarding cost of Web3 more accessible. Most people don't have thousands of dollars in disposable income to get started. Pay close attention to projects which let you onboard for a cost of less than $100. When I read this, I was just like, is this what people are paying to onboard? Obviously, with Ethereum and things like this, with the various transactions that you have to do, you're going to end up with transactions that amount to about $100, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, I mean, Hive is free depending on which app you use, you know.
It's
just crazy to me. There's people talking about.
Well, I think there's a reason for this. Overlooking people who think there's no fees automatically think scam or centralized because they're like, well, how do you pay the miners? And then when you talk DPoS, they think, oh, well, that's too few nodes. So people have this mentality that you need 1,000 nodes and you have to pay $100 transaction to be decentralized. When you go and you look at, there's proof of work right now, but there's a handful of mining pools that control the Ethereum blockchain. When they move the proof of stake, there's going to be a handful of wallets. But the point is, it doesn't matter how many nodes you have. It matters to an extent, right? You can't have one. But when you have centralization of the voting, it doesn't matter how many nodes you have because the voting can make all nodes raise their right hand whenever it wants. And the ones that don't are invisible. They don't matter. They can take over the network. So this mantra of thousands of nodes, but the pre-mine's okay. Thousands of nodes, but the pre-mine's okay. But coin voting on pre-mine is okay. It's this ass backwards mentality when it's like, no, just consolidate the nodes, pay them via inflation, right? Because there's not that many, so you don't need that many inflation. Have good token distribution with no pre-mine. Have the community vote on these nodes because that's what you do in staking pools. You vote in staking pools. You vote with your hash rate and mining pools. It's the same concept. It's just being more practical about it. Now you can have zero fees and it makes sense, but there's just this mantra of you need 1,000 nodes, and if it's cheap transactions, there must be something wrong with it. So it's just a bit of I guess PR marketing awareness to let people understand that what's actually happening in practice is what's ultimately you have a handful of nodes on these proof of stake coins where we're actually more decentralized with 20 nodes. So I don't know. That's sort of where I see why people are just like missing the obvious, right? It's like the elephant in the room. Hive's not a small chain anymore. It's producing so many transactions. Splinterlands could not function on Ethereum. It'd break Ethereum into 1,000 pieces. And it's doing it with paying very no transaction fees, getting all these resource credits for free just from staking. People will wake up though because businesses always sniff that out because they want to save money. So
yeah, I think you're talking about the 20 nodes, but you could argue that a lot of these other chains they all end up grouping into mining pools anyway. 4, 5, 6, 7 mining pools. It's ultimately a similar scenario, except that they don't have they're giving up the so-called decentralization, but they're not getting the fast fees out of it and the governance systems and the decentralization. So yeah, I mean, I just find it hilarious that people are paying that type of money to onboard to Web3, and then on top of that, respected developers within the ecosystem have highlighted this problem and are trying to work on reducing the cost to onboard down to less than $100. Which just seems crazy to me. It seems crazy that they're even bothering. I mean, why would you do that when there's other chains out there? I'm very interested to hear people's takes on things like Polygon, Matic, and Solana, because they seem to have similar solutions to what Hive has, except, of course, as far as I'm aware, they gave their teams significant pre-mines. I don't know if you know much about Polygon, Alan, or Matic.
No, since going maximalish, I've kind of switched off from the other things. The problem is it's so the space is so overwhelming, and I'm busy doing other things. So yeah. and so I just decided not to.
I know the feeling. I think Dan's got enough time on his hands to keep up with that. You know the pre-mine status of most of these projects, don't you, Dan?
Yeah, Solana had significant VC insider pre-mine. They proudly call themselves Solana seed round investors, which is a joke. And then you have, of course, any layer 2 on Ethereum that I know of that's top 100, top 200 is pre-mine. Chicken and the egg. No one works for free. That's why, Hive is that golden chicken that chicken that shit out of golden egg. Vitalik went over this over and over again. You need funding, aka you need to sell your community's soul, the security of the chain, in order to actually build the technology to run the chain. I think that's ass backwards. Bitcoin, you can see, did it right. Technology is great that Satoshi did, but it's not like you need 100 developers all trying to improve the base layer of Bitcoin. It's like it works. It's like a Rolex. You really don't need to tamper with it too much. And then you can build layer 2s outside of it that stand alone and complement Bitcoin. But Bitcoin didn't need to sell its soul, right? Satoshi wasn't like, all right, we're going to sell the security of the chain so I can get paid so I can write this code. He wrote up some code, he made it open source, and it was scrappy at first. It wasn't the best code. Like, he had a lot of help. Hal Finney, a lot of people volunteered and did this stuff because it's a passion. And that's how it has to start. It can't be started. It can't be forced. It can't be like, oh, this has to happen, so I need to get paid and I have to hire a dev team or it's never going to happen. Well, then it shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen if that's the way it has to. It happens or it doesn't. Bitcoin didn't need to happen. It needed to happen, but Satoshi wasn't like, oh, I have to do this. Like, I have to pay a team. He did it because he thought, hey, this is, just obviously I don't know what he's thinking, who was thinking, but it's more like, this is a passion. I see there's a problem in the world. I'm going to make a ripple, put it out there, see what people think. And then people picked it up and ran with it. And now it's much bigger than him today. That's how it has to happen. And Hive sort of happened in that way. We could have, why was it so important? Why didn't we just die? Why didn't we just say, cool, pay us off, Justin's son? I don't care. It's a crypto. I'm here to make money. For some reason, we were like, no, we want freedom. We want to preserve our censorship resistance. And we went through all the trouble and doing all the craziness, sleepless nights, forked, and now have an ownerless chain where nobody owns more than 2, 3, 4% of the supply. No one can change. Everyone has to talk. Everyone has to come together. It's that's how it has to happen, and it's rare, but it will happen because it's called life moving on you, and life moved on us, and here we are. But yeah, it's very rare. That's why I agree with Alan. There's so much noise. It's so difficult to keep up because it's just it's like you hear Web3, but then you have birds. Web3 everywhere. You're like Web3, and it's like this word doesn't even have meaning anymore. And then when you lose words of the meaning of words, you can't communicate anymore because we're going to invent a new term for Web3. That's why it's so difficult to be seen, so to speak, because it's just like everyone's just a brick in the wall, and it's difficult to see what's fake and what's not.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting because I just automatically assume that the project's got some kind of pre-mine, some kind of VC behind it. The reason for that is because it's only really in a couple of ecosystems that people have realized that we now print our own money to fund our own projects, and the direction of that currency that's decided by the community. And so there's no centralized backing of any of the projects anymore. They're either funded by the community or they're not. Mm-hmm. And if they've got enough, if the founders are personally funding themselves, like we were doing with FreeSpeak, and we still are, that's all gonna happen as it happens. The founders can be as passionate as they like, but the major projects then get funded by the community itself, and so we don't need to go out asking for VCs or asking for input from some other private investors or anything. And this is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful time because people are in that old Web2 mindset of we have to get a VC to support us. But then they say, okay, but when the VCs ask for some sort of terms and conditions or some kind of prerequisites, they'll submit a little bit and say, okay, we won't do full free speech then, or we won't talk about everything, or we won't behave in this way because the VC said, and if we don't do what the VC said, then we lose our money, right? This mentality is still deeply ingrained in crypto today. And it doesn't need to be that way anymore. We can use SIPs and DAOs. We can use DeFi funds to self-finance. And by doing that, and also proof of brain as well is a very important one. All these ways to finance ourselves and print our own money, that we can now move away from the centralized backing of VCs and the compromisation that brings to the projects. But I don't really see anyone even thinking like that yet in the ecosystem. And so as a result, I just assume most of the projects are almost always centralized. There are a few popping up here and there now that are starting to realize that decentralization is more important, and that people, over time are going to start to select decentralization more than centralization. But that's a few years away yet. So we're going to have to deal with this for a little bit longer. There may be a time in the future where the communities realize they've got the technical capability and they can fork out these VC funds and move on to new chains in a similar way to what Hive did. But I don't see that happening just yet. I don't think people have quite realized just yet. I see Alan making some noise there.
Was I? Sorry. I was just going to criticize some Bitcoin maxis that I follow, like Matt Odell and people like that. Really, really highly respected, honest people, but they are so. I think they've been so burned by the rubbish projects in the crypto space.
Yeah.
They won't even entertain anything on a blockchain. They will pick a centralized solution over something that's not Bitcoin, but is on a blockchain. There's a definite anti-blockchain mentality out there with the Bitcoiners, which is it's really strange because they're jilted from all of the crap out there. So you've got 90% of it's crap and centralized, and then the other 5% is genuine. But the Bitcoin maxis who could probably make a difference to those projects in a genuine way would move away from them and ignore them because they just thought, well, probably similar to what I was just saying, they just automatically assume they're crap. So exactly, and I think but the number's probably far higher than that, isn't it? It's probably 99% crap.
Yeah. I was being generous.
Just to assume crap, move on.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But then at the same time, really good... like you were saying, that
okay.
Go on, Dan.
Well, go ahead. Well, I was just saying, I thought of a really, really good counterpoint that I heard. I forgot. I think you know him, Matt. So the best argument I've heard why Bitcoin maximalists use centralized products, they say, okay, everything else is centralized except Bitcoin. All you need is hard money, and then you'll have the free market. So yeah, it's like we have centralized things, but they'll compete it out. If one censors the other, then we can jump. Yeah, it may be a hassle. We can't move our fit list or anything like that, but they just assume everything else is centralized. It's actually a very novel argument. I thought that was great. It falls apart, obviously, because these platforms collide like mining pools, and you get banned on one, you get banned on all, and then it's getting to the point where there is no more free market in this realm. So they're going to have to fold and realize, we need to make a censorship-resistant platform for media accounts. That's the only way forward, because that argument's starting to look pretty stale now. But that's sort of the rationale I think a lot of these hardcore Bitcoin maxis have. They just think everything's centralized, so it's like, let them compete and I'll just use whatever's best and convenient, and I have my hard money, and hard money solves everything.